and welcome back. I'm Kevin DeSmet, a student at Learning Alias, and this is part 2 in what is going to be a 3-part series on hull alignment. So I've got the scene the way that I've left it last time. So I have this curve right here, which I've already deleted and used to create the surface, together with this shoulder blend. I had that, and what I made in part 1 was this curve, and this curve, and the curves on surface used in the alignment of those curves. And now I'm going to start building the surfaces. So the first thing that I'll do that might make this a little bit more easy is I'm going to go to Object Display, Draw Style, and I'm going to make both the surface and curve CVs a little bigger. I just want to emphasize, I don't really work like this. You see, on this surface, I don't know, it's almost getting a little cluttery. But I think for the recording, it will be quite beneficial. So I'm going to turn the draw style to the large crosses. So I'm going to make the surfaces. Now this is the relatively easy bit. And then we're going to direct model them so that they're really nice. And that, again, is the tricky bit. And that's why everyone's here. So I'm going to collapse some tabs. These were open from last time. And I'm going to pick the square tool. So remember that I said that the most important tools for this workflow were going to be EP curve, align, and then square. Well, now's the time to use square. So I'm going to go and click Advanced, and I'm going to open up all the options, and I'm just going to select just like this. Now because I don't have a curve here anymore, I know that I selected the surface. Otherwise I would not drag a pick box around it, because you have to have the edge in order to be able to give some continuity. So the first thing I do, the very first thing, is I always turn on the CV hull. And you can see it's not looking that great, but what I'm going to do is boundary 1 should be curvature, 2 should be curvature, 3 remains free, and 4 should be curvature. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. Now, very important that you understand, I want to give a parental advisory here, because we are going to be working with explicit control. Okay? Just so everyone's on the same book here. Okay, so we're back. I'm going to check on the explicit control box. And I'm going to go for 6 and 6. Now, very important, I did not see this last time, but I can show you now, is my blend surf on the shoulder was actually degree 7, so I apologize for that. And the same with the deck is actually degree 7. And, you know, maybe that's not a bad idea for this blend, so I am going to decide to build the whole blend to degree 7. So you could just go for 7, and you can see the CVs line up, but then my curve doesn't line up anymore. And I don't really like that, because my curve is going to be pretty important to me. So I'm going to go out of the tool, and I'm going to delete the square. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to query edit one of these alignment histories. I appear to have lost a line on this curve as well, so I'm going to realign it. And decide to drop it down to degree 5 first to fully constrain it, and I think I will, because I don't think I have alignment on this either. No, I don't, because if I click on this end, it activates the other end, meaning I have lost alignment on this curve as well. And I know it's curvature even though I don't see an option box, because 3 CVs are highlighted. And now I'm going to query edit one of these aligns, and I'm going to turn it up to degree 7. This is very strange. The curve does not look very good, so I'm going to query edit this. Let me see here. What if I do degree 6? See, that's the problem you get with degree 7. The higher the curve degree is, the harder it is to control it. So you can see degree 5 fully constrains the curve. Degree 6 it just adds in a CV right in the middle, exactly as we would expect. Degree 7? I don't know. It's better this time. It's really weird. Although it's still a little close, but we're going to have to manually modify these two CVs anyway. That's going to be required because they are not constrained by anything. Now, in a newer version of Alias, you could use the G3 curvature here. G3 curvature doesn't have that much uses because most of the time you want to achieve a G3 condition by sliding tangent and curvature CVs. But in this case, because we're actually going to build to degree 7, G3 curvature would be a very handy thing indeed. So I'm going to do the same here. I already had to realign this last time, as you may remember. So I'm going to nudge it up, and well, this is exactly what I would expect. So again, look at this though. In a perfect world, every CV on a curve is spaced equally. However, these two CVs are spaced pretty far apart. Then these two are pretty close, and then these two are pretty far apart again. So we'll see what that gives. We're going to have to adjust this for sure. This parent surf is looking pretty sweet, and this parent surf is also looking pretty good. So you see, that's what we're going to want to try to do. We're going to want to have all the X's in a nice flowing line and evenly distributed across the surface as much as possible. We may need to weight the CVs a little bit. Just a little terminology here. Of course, you can select the CV, go to the information window, and you can give it a weight. But that's not what I'm talking about. I never give stuff weight. Not in this way. When I say weighting CVs, I mean moving them closer in on a curve or further away from a curve so that the CVs are no longer equally spaced to give it acceleration or to give it some lead out, depending. I mean, there are a lot of situations where you can weight CVs and get beautiful results, so you don't need quite as many CVs. You get easier control, certainly in the early stages of a design. Like this is a theoretical blend. So I'm going to do this again. And this is set to free, which is not good. So let's put on the CV hull. So this is what I want to see. So first of all, I don't want to see this. I don't want to see my square not lining up with parent surfs and curves that I have set up for it. So I want to go degree 7, and it will snap to those curves. Notice, if I go degree 6, these CVs seem, you know, somewhat awkwardly distributed. So you don't really have too much control over that. Degree 7 allows me to say, you know, snap to this surface CV and snap to this curve CV, and then I have full control over everything. Now, I could also turn on collinear boundaries for 1, but I'm not going to do that. I don't think there's anything in this blend that's strictly collinear, because it's constantly turning around. It's constantly radial in its distribution. I may turn it on though for this surface edge when I make this patch, but not for this surface edge because it's a radial thing. If I turn it on, you know, you see, it's just not right. With it on, these CVs this CV would have to go way too far out in order to not have this kink. Whereas if it's off, it's a much more natural flow. So the collinear options are very nice, but in a blend situation, it's a radial distribution of the CVs. So I see that I have some curvature failing, so I can do the continuity check. And I can see that I have practically no curvature. And at some point along this edge, I have no curvature. Because 0.95, it's practically no curvature. You might think, oh, it's 0.9. Okay, that's still small. But it's not small because it only goes from 0 to 1, the curvature deviation. So there's complete lack of curvature at some point. And I think that's caused by having curvature on boundary 2 that might be forcing it into a condition where I don't have curvature anymore on boundary 1. We're going to direct model that. And you can see a tiny little angle, but it's really small. And on the bottom boundary, a tiny deviation in curvature, which is also really small. Now, if we want to, we can play with the 1-3 boundary and the 2-4 boundary blend sliders, because we might want to get rid of that discontinuity without direct modeling it essentially directly. And we can see that we have already achieved continuity. We have got tangent continuity along this edge, and we've established curvature along the bottom. So, you know, it just makes me feel better. You don't have to do this at all. Let me just be very clear about that. So, I'm gonna turn these off, because a lot of people, they focus on the continuity comb locators. But with CVs this bad, right now, that ain't good. So what I need to do is, first of all, I'm gonna save the file under a new name. I'll call it part 3, because eventually when this blend is all squared up, that will be the starting point for the third part in the series. So what I want to do first is I want to query edit this curve. And what I'm going to do, you see I'm not using any shading. I will in part 3 when I'm looking at the highlights and I'm really working it. But in this scenario, think of this surface. This square is only just birthed. It's a little toddler that's 2 years old in alias time. Okay? So there's no point looking at locators. Okay, I looked at the locator and I slid it around a bit with that 1-3 boundary blend slider influence, but really it doesn't matter because it's not looking good. And if the CVs look good, trust me, the surface will follow. Or you will only have to adjust it slightly to get it to look good. If the CVs look bad, you're really, I mean, it might give you continuity, it might not give you continuity. So this is a CV hull alignment is so important, because if you get it right, there's practically guaranteed continuity. So I'm sliding this down. You can see I'm just trying to get a radial distribution. Let's unclutter the screen a bit. I'm trying to get a radial distribution going from here like that, and then I'm thinking, okay, where does this need to be in order to line up with that? So this will need to go down, but then it will probably line up with that. So I'm thinking, yeah, okay, that could work. And it will be a bit of a back and forth. So I create this square, then I create the other one, I adjust them a bit, and then the middle square is going to be the toughest because it has to have curvature on all sides. So I'm going to adjust this as well. And yeah, G3 continuity in the align tool would have been a really good thing right here. So I'm going to have to do it a little bit more manually for the two in the middle. So you can see it's already looking substantially better, but it's still going up a bit too much. So I'm going to query edit the curve. Always query edit the curve so you have history. And I'm just going to drag it down. I think that looks pretty good. And remember, without seeing all the patches, there's no way of knowing. So I'm getting it pretty close, and then I'll dial it in later. I'm going to do another save. And you could also use the non-proportional viewing tool, which is actually very cool. So if I turn off perspective and I hit this little checkbox, I can drag with my mouse to get a distorted view. So you can see if I make it really squishy and really fat, it exacerbates the problem. Like you can see right here, these 4 CVs, they're probably a little bit too far off to the right. You know, they're nudged too far off. There's a, you know, maybe. I mean, this is an enhanced distorted view. You can see though that these 2 bottom rows, I mean, they still look good. So I'm going to just turn perspective back on, and you can see the view's back to normal. So that's something that you can use. But in this stage, it's a bit too early. This could be very useful if we're making fine-tuned alterations. But I just wanted to show it to you because it's a very handy tool. Now I'm going to do the same for the top. But you can see basically what I'm doing is I'm using construction history. That's 1. And 2, I'm always tumbling the view. This blend has no relevance in any orthographical view, really. You know, it's a radial blend. It's not, you know, it's not a front view thing. And I'm not having any shading on, though I will put on the shading when I start to evaluate it. So when I have all the patches in place, I will definitely put on the shading. Also, when you're sliding the CVs, keep tumbling the view. You know, it doesn't have to be much. Just, you know, look at it from the left, then look at it from the right, and then look at it from the top. you can see I've got a little bit of a weirdness here. That's probably caused by this CV having to maintain curvature with this boundary. But it's not really lining up with this. So I may need to adjust the parent surf a little, or I need to direct model that. We'll see in a little bit. So this surface is pretty okay. So now I'm going to build this surface patch. Now if you want to, I will put on the showroom shader just to see where we're at. And I do this. So I toggle off the model, and we don't really need these locators. We know it's good. And I just give it a look-see. And it looks pretty okay to me. You can see there's a little bit of a sudden jump in the highlight here, but that's okay because we don't have curvature on that boundary. But it's looking pretty smooth. No obvious seams, no obvious discontinuity where you can see a visible break in the highlights. So for right now, this is perfect. This is exactly where we want to be. So now I'm going to build this patch, and let me go back into the square tool, and we want free on this, then curvature, curvature, curvature. Again, I turn on the CV hull. It's the first thing I always do. And I'm going to turn the shading back off. I just find it, when I'm doing CV hull alignment, working without shading, I find it extremely handy. For anything else, I work with the shading on. This is like pretty much the only thing where I don't use the shading, really. But it's very handy. You don't have, you can really focus on getting those CVs exactly where you want to be. So I'm going to query edit this. I'm just going to check out the continuity. Well, that's pretty good, eh? But of course, it's a much simpler thing because this square has to have continuity with the C pillar, coming down, and that's much more tricky. So that's actually a pretty simple patch. And I am going to turn on the collinear option, or not. You can see even here the collinear option. It's not really what we want. It's not linaic enough. But it's close. You could turn it on here. So this is all good. Now what I'm going to do, certainly degree 7 to have the CVs line up in the V direction, or the U, I'm not sure. Let's see. In the U direction, like that. And then in the V direction, I can play around with this a bit. Maybe I don't need quite so many CVs. Like maybe I make it degree 5. But depending on these CVs, I'm going to have to adjust them a bit to get the blend. So I'm going to make it 6 as well. And basically, wait, let me turn that down. No, I'm going to make it 5 for now. I kind of want the footprint. Now what's the footprint? The footprint is if I make a little square of CVs and I select them, I look at the aspect ratios. So the aspect ratio of this edge, hull, if you will, to this hull, and the length. The difference in length is the aspect ratio. If possible, I try to keep this roughly square. So you can see it's not square. It's a little squished in one direction, but it's okay. Right here it is too. I need less geometry in that direction than I do the other. So, but I try to keep it in control, so it's not too out of whack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to adjust this curve, and I'm just going to slide the CV, and I'm going to imagine what it would be like if it were to hook up to this guy. So it has to slide up a lot. Maybe I'll slide the other one down. And you see what the deviation combs are doing? I'm like, oh no, I better move that back. That's why I don't turn the damn things on right away, because there's no point. I'm going to slide this around so much. I'm just going to have faith in the CVs. If the CVs look good, I'm happy. Faith in CVs. Okay, that looks pretty alright. And then I'm going to do the bottom. And you can minimize that. It won't throw you out of the tool at all. You can just keep on going. You can see I'm making very slight movements. I'm not being too erratic because I want to see what it's doing to that whole hull, sliding that single curve CV. Okay, so this bottom is looking pretty good. I think I can line these two up almost like it is. And I think I can align these two up almost like it is. The middle ones here, well, they need some work. And this is going to be a bit tricky because it appears that I'm going to have to move this down. Or I'm going to have to move these up. I think I'm going to, you know what I'm going to do? You see the difference in here? If I were to connect it with a straight line, it would be skewed. I can show that with just a simple EP curve. And I'll snap, and you can see, you know, it's not a straight line. If you were to imagine that this boundary right here and this curve need to be roughly perpendicular, you can see that it's not perpendicular. You know, it's at an angle. I like to keep this somewhat perpendicular, or as close to perpendicular as possible. That gives you a good flow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compromise. Never move one CV at a time. So I'm going to query edit this curve, and I'm going to move this one up a little bit, just like that. And then I'm going to query edit this curve, and I'm going to move this one down a little bit. You can see it's already given us a much better flow. So it's a balancing act. And no one CV is the hero here. So I'm going to move this one up, and then I'm going to move this one down, and then this one up a little bit more. There, that's much better. Now I have to be careful though. That may ruin how this looks right here. And it did a little bit, but actually it's not as bad as I thought. So you have to look at it from like almost dead on, like normal to the surface to judge the flow, and you have to look at it like almost 90 degrees to the surface to judge the depth, because that's another important thing about the surface structure. It's not just about the flow from a normal view looking at it straight on, it's also from looking at it from a really shallow angle. You can see depth in the surface. So this is tricky because the C-pillar, you can see this CV is higher than this CV. And to be honest, maybe it is. So maybe that's not even a problem. Or maybe it is, and then we would have to work it out by modifying the actual C-pillar surf. You know, this one. You can see, whoa, it's pretty big. And then we'd have to move that in order to move this. But right now I don't think it's going to be too much problem. I'm going to degree up this one more to give it a somewhat more gradual, smooth change. And remember, I'm working to degree 7, so I can do that. So now I'm going to move these two middle CVs because they're really not very good. And the way I do this, because I don't have I do have construction history. Okay, then what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to move this one tighter. So what I do is I pick the CV of the slave, and it's real easy. I mean, I don't know exactly how I can move this without losing continuity, because I don't think I have this aligned. I can check. No, I don't have any alignment on here. So I could align it and then redo the square. And guess what? That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to delete the square. Sometimes you have to go back and forth a little bit. But because our curves are the way we want it, it's not like we have to rework anything. I mean, it's just real easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to align. I'm going to align this surface to that. Partial. Okay. So it just takes the shortest distance, and with curvature continuity. Don't matter this, I may need to change this surface as well. It's a bit of a ping pong game. So we have curvature, and to be dreadfully honest, I could put the locator off, but actually I'm going to leave it on. Pick nothing, and then do the square again. So it's exactly the same thing. Turn on the CV hull, and this really does not need degree 7. You can see when the degree is too high, the transition becomes almost linear. You know, like the CVs form a line. What a waste of CVs. This is not very good. There's no need for it. So degree 5, you can see the CVs, they all have a little angle, and that's exactly what I want. I don't want to have so many CVs that they're practically, you know, every little hull piece is practically straight. That's not what I want. I want that slight bend to go into the blend. Now I don't want it too low, because first of all, I'll never get my gap, you know, on this edge to work. It's, well, in this case apparently it did. But look, see here the problem. I mean, I'll never get the gaps sorted out with too low CV count. Also, the angles here become too much. So that's a bit of a degree thing. And you know, just turn it off. You see, I'm still not hitting the continuity with degree 5, but I don't care. I like degree 5. So I'm going to move. Oh, I made a bit of a mistake here. The align tool only, of course, constrains the first two CVs. I want to move the third and the fourth. But there's no real problem. I still move the master. I still move the slave CV of the slave surface, and the master will update. So I'm going to move this one first. So the way I move these freaks is I use slide a lot. So I'm basically moving them along their hulls, which does not really move the surface very much at all. But it does, of course, allow me very, very masterful control, skillful control about the interior parametrization of the surfaces. So I move this up, and if I want to, I can turn the performance options on, but I'm not going to do this. Okay, I want it to line up with that one. Move it a little more. And see, because I have construction history, the whole hull moves. So the construction history moves like some sort of awesome non-proportional modification. You know, like some sort of even more awesome non-proportional modification tool. There, so I just want that radial structure to come through. And right now I'm good enough that I want to make the last patch. So I'm going to go to the square tool, and I'm going to go curvature. And now I am going to be careful to pick and not just drag a box around it, and make sure I have the surface edge. Though I think it will prefer the surface edge. Let's give it a shot. Yeah, it prefers the surface edge, even if you do a pick box. Alright. Well, if you thought Alias didn't just totally rock, then you were wrong, my friend. You were wrong. So let's go to degree 7. And now we're in paradise. Okay, now we're trucking. Now we've got some serious stuff going on. This is for the big boys, because now we have to make it all work. You know, but it's all good, because we would have never really known that this CV was up too high if we didn't have all the patches. And there's no point in making this surface perfect and having all the locators show up green, because we're going to move it anyway, and that might make it turn red again, and then we have to move it in a different way in order to get it to go green again. Now we do want all the boundary locators to be green in most cases, but not straight away. You will kill yourself. It's all about speed and knowing when you need what. So in this case, you know, it doesn't amaze me why this is bad. This is one of them free CVs, because I just had to make it degree 7, eh? So of course I picked the curve, but I don't have construction history to that CV, so I just slide it. And see how fast it is. See how quick it is. There, that's already a lot better. I'm still not getting what I thought I would. That's probably a depth thing. Oh, the depth is alright. See how the depth kind of sorted itself out because we have degree 7? You just need this amount of CVs. To be perfectly honest and perfectly blunt, I think the pillar surf, the big pillar surf that we're aligning to, this one, also may need some slight adjustments to get this perfectly right. But remember, this is a theoretical blend, you know, so we just want something that looks kind of good and gives us great highlights to judge Okay, do we want to make this fully blended? Because remember, the Relay 5, it's not fully blended. There's a little tangent break. Not really at this region, but... And you see, I just move around in perspective view. And remember, see, it's getting a little slower now, which is to be expected. It's having to calculate a lot more. But I'll prefer having the construction history set up and having it calculate a little bit than to have to move every CV by hand, because that's just very, very tedious, and you make more mistakes that way. So I'm always picking the curve CV so I don't lose any history. Now, once we start dialing in the locators, and that's going to be for next episode in the series, we are going to do that. So you see, I'm not hitting this. It's going back. So I need to pick the slave CV surf. Oh, look, if you get this message, say no, because it means I accidentally picked surface CV. And I want to pick the curve. That's funny. Okay, yeah. I was looking at the wrong surface. I didn't actually think I had a curve there. See, it warns us. It warns us. And we move it. It's already looking better. Now this should be moved down. So see, it's really not that hard. It's just, yeah, it's a little tedious, but look at how beautiful it already is. I mean, we're now we are discussing, oh, look, this has a little bit too much of an angle still. But honestly, we're practically 90% of the way home. And when we get to part 3, and we start doing the highlights, and we start really tweaking the highlights and getting them really good, this is the kind of control that we have. This fine control. You can never get that without working with CVs and with hulls. And you can never get that just with a freeform blend. You have to have this amount of control. And you can see with construction history on, it's not even all that bad. And it's logical. You just make the CVs look like they're all in the same team. And see, if I'm not getting it really good, then maybe it is a depth thing. I switch to NUV, and I will have a little step size, because this tends to be a bit more subtle. I zoom in real tight, and I just like that. And I just puff it up a little bit. Too much. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think that really did what I wanted it to. So if something's not going right, you try another method. But actually it's looking a bit better. So again, you look at it kind of dead on to judge the flow, and then you look at it kind of from a shallow angle to judge the depth. To be honest, I think I can wrap it up right here. It's looking pretty good. You can see there's no single CV that's jutting out too much or that's dipping in too much. I have matching hulls, which means that the CVs on two separate surfaces, they all have a little companion. You know, they're friends. And when I look at it kind of from a dead-on view, there's no real CV that's, I mean, yeah, you could argue this needs to come down. And really that's about it. So I'm going to wrap her up by doing that. Oh yeah. There. Good enough. Now, just for kicks and giggles, let's check the combs and let's check with the showroom. This is before we dial in the locators, but we already have a pretty good flow in the hull structure. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? I mean, seriously. Come on. How is that not nice? How is that not already really, really good? And we didn't spend 2 hours getting a single locator to turn green. Trust me, I've been there. No, we put some faith in the CVs and check it out. It's already looking really nice. But let's be mischievous and let's be really evil and let's say highlights, schmighlights. Put on those locators. I mean, if the boss says put on the locators, then we put on the locators. So let's put on the locators. because, you know, it's a quick check that they do. Oh, is the model pretty good? Oh, let's just put on some locators. Oh, it's C. Whoa! I'm actually amazing myself. Oh, yeah, this one's still really bad. I'm going to turn off the shading so you can read the values a bit more. Also, it's a great idea to put on the edge labels in the comb. So I'm going to remove this because it may just be that the curvature is only bad like right at the join, but the rest of the edge of the boundary is actually pretty good. Yeah, see, it's like that. It's only the upper portion that's bad. So the portion that has to blend with the pillar. So this is going to be a bit of a juggling act. Seriously, like the toughest point on the whole model. And a little spike right here as well. So that's weird. We can work that out, no problem. We knew this one was curvature, so that, you know, we knew that. Oh, curvature, nice. Okay. Pretty good. Oh, looking nice. Pretty dandy. See, we didn't. I mean, this is nice, you know. And CV hull flow looks pretty good. The highlight looks pretty good, and even the locators aren't really complaining all that much. So I really hope you've enjoyed this part 2 in hull alignment, and join me please for part 3. It's going to be really cool. We're going to be doing the highlights, and we're going to get that nasty locator fixed. Or if we can't get it fixed, then we'll get it better, because I can't guarantee that we can fix this without adjusting pillar. You know, the C pillar, the pillar that's coming down this big surface, and then we would have to pretty much redo all the patches, or at least to some extent. And this is a concept model. We don't need to do that. If we get it better, I'm going to be pretty satisfied. Or if we can nudge deviation closer to the actual corner, so it's like only about to these 2 CVs, I'm going to be happy. So I want to get rid of all of this up to this peak. I want to make it curvature, and then that's going to be satisfactory to me. So I've been Kevin Smet, a student at Learning Alias, and see you in a bit.